morning, good afternoon, good evening all, it's Bear here. And I'd like to welcome you to my YouTube channel, aboxwithnolid, a channel I'm creating not just to bring the awareness around the reality of complex trauma, but I'm really trying to get into the lived experience and the nuances around our traumatic responses so that you guys can learn ways of helping yourself to heal and just to improve the quality of your lives. Now in this video, again, I'm still working. This is the third video in this fear state, these fear state videos. And this video, I want to get into how attachment trauma and an assigned fear state go hand in hand. They feed off each other. The fear state itself was created by our attachment trauma, by how our connections either failed us or never were there in the first place when you're looking at pre-verbal and early childhood trauma. And our assigned fear is a response to attachment trauma. It's how our body responds. In a very early stage, we were put into a position where we were expected to do things to survive that we didn't have the capacity to do. And that is the root of an assigned fear. That fear that we assign to everything around us, because it's internal. It's about our own ability to cope, respond, act an appropriate action or whatever we need to do in whatever given situation has triggered it. And that relates directly to attachment trauma. When we come from a survival trauma base, assigned fear is ever present, because we are constantly alone and isolated, having to self-soothe, self-regulate, and do everything ourselves. We don't know how to actively be part of any group. And that is what drives, that is the fuel that feeds the drive of that assigned fear base. We know what we can cope with. We know anything extra is too much. So when we work with assigned fear, we need to work with how we connect. We need to bring in more knowledge and more resources to secure our base and to secure our home and our connections and so forth, to be able to respond. The more resources we have, the less that fear state has to be triggered, because we know we have these skills, these resources, and these things we can do. The more we know, the more we learn, and how we can skill ourselves up to cope, how we can respond, how we engage, answer questions, whatever is bringing this to the surface. This is how we work with assigned fear. Now, as I said in the beginning of this video, assigned fear and attachment trauma go hand in hand. They are 100% part of each other. And they will either positively or negatively affect each other when we try to heal it. If we start to push our assigned fear in the way that the world tells us, face your fears and they'll go away, we are feeding the intensity and we're negatively reinforcing our attachment trauma. Because we're giving ourselves more and more evidence of the reasons why we're in the situation we are in. And for the therapists out there watching this is the critical understanding that even if cognitively the person is going, yeah, I get what you're saying, yeah, I'm enacting these steps and these instructions you're giving me, internally, they're more than likely feeding the attachment trauma of why I'm in this situation in the first place. And for me, and from the experiences I've had with all the different areas of advocacy and all the areas around mental health that I've been in over many, many years, I see the aftermath of that far too often. And I'm trying to make these videos to prevent that. So in healing assigned fear, we need to heal and work with attachment trauma. We need to learn how to be part of. And as I've said in some of the other attachment videos, creating one or two people within your inner circle where they are willing to give you the grace to be able to learn how to emotionally engage, to where your triggered responses, they don't perceive it as a threat. You're not attacking them. You're just responding the only way you know how. You have no maliciousness in your response. It's getting that level of grace, that level of understanding that allows you to skill up and teach your nervous system that you can cope, and learning the actual skills to cope, to enact responses, to engage, titrate, be part of, and adequately respond. Teaching your muscles and body systems, the muscle memory skill sets to engage a response. That is how you work with assigned fear. And for me, assigned fear is the dominant type of fear. It is ever present in so many areas of our society, and it's the least understood. And it drives the episode part of trauma. When you really start to delve into assigned fear and attachment trauma, that's the driving force behind the outbursts that we see in the news media, where somebody has an episode and bad things happen. That's where we see the outbursts and the complete loss of tempers, the complete loss of any form of control, the complete meltdowns. This assigned fear is the driving force behind that. And if we can learn within ourselves that tipping point where we can enact what we need to lessen that response, not to feed the getting the hell out of Dodge, but to lessen that response, to be in control of that horse, we can save ourselves from being pushed to that point of snapping, from being pushed to that point of withdrawal, fetal, those points where we have a really strong response. That is, in a nutshell, what I want to try to convey in this video. In the last couple, as I said, around assigned fear, and because it's so broad, I cannot give the specifics that some of you may need. But understand its driving force is because of attachment trauma. To address it and work with it, you need to work on healing your attachment trauma and work with your attachment trauma. When we connect and belong and be part of that, fear will recede and it will not be there. The key is recognizing the differences between the two. The key is recognizing that tipping point within us so that we can start to actively engage with the situation so that we can learn new skill sets. Because if we tip too far with any traumatic response, the cognitive brain, our higher brain function, shuts down. We go into a functional free state or a complete free state. And we can't learn stuff. We can read and recite all this crap, but it's not going to go in. We're not going to remember it, and we're not going to incorporate it. And again, this is another key component of understanding the nature of an assigned fear state, because when we're trying to work with healing, because that fear state is ever present, if it gets above a certain level, what we're trying to learn, we won't take on, we won't take in, and it breeds a level of frustration that, from personal experience, I know it drives you nuts. Because you're going, I should be able to do this. Is not complicated. I should be able to do this. And that creates this feedback loop that reminds the body of why we have attachment trauma. And anybody who's gone through any form of significant, prolonged traumatic experiences, complex trauma or pre-verbal early childhood, we have attachment trauma. And this fear base is one of the fuel sources created from that attachment trauma. So, putting all this together, when we start to understand how different things feel in our body, we can start to intervene before it gets too far, because that intervention allows us to take new information in. It allows us to go, okay, it's rising, I need to take a step back, get a little bit more functional, so forth and so forth, taking new information in. And the more often we do that, little by little, like as I said in the previous video this morning, I was triggered into an assigned fear response with all these demands when I'm trying to organize some stuff. And it's to where I put the text messages and the phone call to one side until I had the information to answer what they were asking. I didn't listen to the phone. I didn't respond to the messages. I went, this is what I need to find out first. And I kept myself in a cognitive presence to be able to find out the information, to be able to adequately respond to the bookings and the information that I needed to do. That is how you start to work. And you do that multiple times throughout the day. You're teaching your nervous system that you can cope that little bit more each day. And that in turn helps you work on healing and working with the connections to your close circle around you. And the more you heal attachment trauma, the more you feel part of, the more secure and base you feel, the more skill sets you have, the more your nervous system will not step into an overwhelming assigned fear response. And the more the world becomes a place to explore, not a place to be afraid of. As always, I love you guys' comment and feedback. Please be mindful, please be safe, and I'll see you all next time.